Winter has a reputation problem. Short days, cold air, gray skies, fewer social plans. Most people talk about winter as something to survive, counting down until it ends, complaining about darkness, feeling sluggish, waiting for life to resume again in spring. And yet, there's a group of people who quietly wait for winter all year. They feel calmer when the temperature drops, more focused when the world slows down. They enjoy the early darkness, the cold mornings, the stillness. While others feel drained, they feel settled. While others feel confined, they feel relieved. This creates an interesting psychological paradox. Why would anyone love a season defined by limitation? At first glance, it sounds like a personality quirk or a contrarian preference. But loving winter isn't really about liking cold weather. It's about how certain minds respond to reduced stimulation, lowered expectations, and environmental containment. Winter changes the rules of daily life. The world becomes quieter, literally and socially. There's less movement, fewer events, fewer visual distractions. Colors soften, sounds dull. The pace drops. And for some nervous systems, this isn't depressing, it's regulating. Psychologically, not everyone thrives in high-stimulation environments. Some people experience constant background tension in busy, bright, fast-paced settings. Summer, with its long days and endless social pressure, can feel overwhelming. Winter removes that pressure by default. It narrows the world. There's also something socially important about winter. It lowers expectations. In many cultures, winter comes with built-in permission to slow down. Fewer obligations, fewer "you should be doing more" signals. Staying inside isn't framed as antisocial. It's normal. Rest becomes socially acceptable rather than something you have to justify. For people who are sensitive to social pressure, this matters more than temperature. Another key factor is predictability. Winter environments tend to be more consistent. Fewer spontaneous outings, more routine, similar clothing each day, stable daily rhythms. For certain personalities, predictability feels safe. It reduces decision fatigue. The brain expends less energy scanning for novelty or responding to constant change. From a psychological standpoint, winter functions as a containment season. It limits external input, and in doing so, it creates internal space. Thoughts slow down, attention turns inward, reflection feels natural rather than forced. People who love winter often describe feeling more themselves during this time, not because they're happier in a loud way, but because they're less overstimulated. This doesn't mean winter lovers are sad or withdrawn. It means their emotional regulation works differently. Their nervous systems don't require constant stimulation to feel engaged. In fact, too much stimulation creates friction. Winter removes that friction naturally. There's also a subtle relationship between winter and attention. With fewer external distractions, focus improves. Reading feels easier. Thinking feels deeper. Tasks feel more contained. Winter doesn't scatter attention. It concentrates it. For people who value depth over speed, this feels satisfying rather than limiting. Importantly, loving winter isn't about rejecting warmth, joy, or social life. It's about the psychological relief that comes when external pressure decreases. When the world contracts slightly, some people finally feel aligned with it. This is why winter lovers often struggle to explain their preference. Saying "I just like winter" sounds shallow, when the experience is actually complex. It's about how the season interacts with mood regulation, attention, energy levels, and emotional safety. To understand why winter feels comforting to some people, it helps to think less about emotions and more about sensory load. Every environment places a certain demand on the nervous system. Light, sound, movement, temperature, and social interaction all compete for attention. The brain constantly processes this information, deciding what matters and what can be ignored. For some people, this system operates efficiently even under high stimulation. Busy streets, loud environments, crowded calendars, these energize rather than drain. For others, the same input quietly exhausts the nervous system. Not dramatically, not obviously, just enough to create a persistent sense of friction. Winter reduces that friction. Visually, the world becomes simpler. Colors mute, movement slows, there are fewer visual signals demanding interpretation. This reduction eases cognitive processing. The brain doesn't have to filter as much information, which lowers background mental noise. It's the difference between standing in a crowded room and sitting in a quiet library. Sound follows the same pattern. Winter environments tend to be quieter. Snow absorbs noise. Fewer people are outdoors. Traffic decreases in many places. Even indoors, people lower their activity. For nervous systems sensitive to sound, this quiet isn't empty, it's restorative. Temperature also plays an unexpected psychological role. Cold creates clear boundaries between inside and outside. Indoors becomes a protected space. Outdoors becomes optional. This contrast reinforces a sense of shelter and containment. When the body feels physically contained, the mind often follows. There's less urgency to be everywhere at once. Winter also limits social stimulation. Fewer spontaneous gatherings, less pressure to attend events, shorter social windows. While this is framed negatively in popular culture, for some people, it provides relief. Social interaction, even when enjoyable, requires emotional processing. Winter lowers the baseline demand. This doesn't mean winter lovers dislike people. It means their nervous systems benefit from predictable, spaced interaction rather than constant availability. Winter creates natural pauses. These pauses allow emotional recovery between engagements. There's also a physiological component. Lower temperatures reduce the likelihood of overheating, which can increase irritability and restlessness. Cold air tends to sharpen alertness without overstimulation. Combined with lower sensory input, this creates a state of calm focus, alert but not agitated. Routine becomes easier in winter as well. Clothing choices narrow, daily schedules stabilize, environmental variability decreases. This consistency reduces decision fatigue. When fewer micro-decisions are required, mental energy is freed up for thought, reflection, or creative focus. From a psychological perspective, winter aligns well with minds that prefer depth over breadth. Instead of scanning wide fields of stimulation, attention narrows naturally. Reading feels easier, thinking feels more linear, tasks feel contained. The environment supports sustained focus rather than constant interruption. It's important to clarify that enjoying winter doesn't mean someone lacks ambition or energy. It means their nervous system thrives under low-noise conditions. High stimulation doesn't inspire, it fragments attention. Winter removes that fragmentation. This also explains why some people feel more emotionally regulated in winter. Reduced sensory input allows emotions to surface without being drowned out. There's space to feel without immediately reacting. Quiet makes internal signals clearer. Another overlooked factor is sleep. Darker evenings align better with natural sleep cycles for some people. Earlier darkness encourages winding down. This improves sleep quality, which in turn stabilizes mood. For winter lovers, this creates a positive feedback loop. Better rest leads to better emotional regulation, which reinforces the preference for the season. While others complain about early sunsets, winter lovers quietly think, finally, the day knows when to end. Winter also reduces comparison. Fewer public events, less visible activity, less pressure to document experiences. Social media slows slightly. This decreases the sense of missing out. When everyone is indoors, no one feels left behind. This reduction in social visibility can be deeply comforting for people who feel overstimulated by constant exposure. Winter creates emotional privacy. It allows people to exist without being seen, evaluated, or expected to perform. In psychological terms, winter supports parasympathetic nervous system activity, the system responsible for rest and recovery. It encourages slowing down rather than pushing forward. For some, this feels like homeostasis rather than stagnation. None of this suggests that winter is inherently better than other seasons. It suggests that different nervous systems thrive under different conditions. Winter lovers aren't resisting life. They're aligning with environments that match how their minds regulate energy and attention. Beyond sensory comfort and nervous system regulation, winter holds a different kind of pull for some people. One that has less to do with temperature and more to do with meaning. Seasons don't just change the environment. They change the stories we tell about ourselves while we're inside them. Winter, psychologically, is a season that does not pretend. It doesn't sell progress, growth, or transformation. It doesn't suggest that everything should be moving forward or expanding. Instead, it normalizes pause. For people who already think in cycles rather than straight lines, this feels intuitively right. Many winter lovers relate to life as something rhythmic rather than linear. Energy rises and falls, focus comes and goes. Winter mirrors that internal reality. It acknowledges that withdrawal isn't failure. It's part of the pattern. This matters because modern culture often frames productivity as constant. There's an implicit expectation to always be visible, improving, achieving. Winter disrupts that narrative. It offers a socially accepted break from forward motion. For people who feel misaligned with nonstop optimization, winter feels validating. There's also a strong connection between winter and identity boundaries. Winter clothes cover the body, skin is hidden, expression becomes subtler. This reduces self-consciousness for people who feel overexposed in warmer seasons. Being physically less visible often creates psychological relief. Winter lovers tend to value internal experience over external display. They're less motivated by being seen and more motivated by feeling aligned. Winter supports this by shifting attention inward, toward thoughts, memories, imagination, and private rituals. Symbolically, winter represents stillness without emptiness. Trees look bare, but they're not dead. Growth is happening underground. This metaphor resonates with people who understand development as something that doesn't always look active from the outside. For these individuals, winter doesn't feel like waiting, it feels like incubation. There's also an emotional clarity associated with winter. The environment is stripped down, there's less sensory decoration. This mirrors how some people prefer to process emotions, directly without excess. Winter feels honest. It doesn't soften discomfort with distractions. It allows emotions to exist plainly. This can be misinterpreted as sadness, but it's often closer to emotional neutrality. Winter lovers don't seek intensity, they seek accuracy. They're comfortable with quieter emotional states that others might rush to escape. Another psychological layer is control. Winter imposes limits that are external and non-negotiable. You can't argue with darkness or cold. For some people, this is freeing. When constraints come from the environment rather than personal failure, guilt decreases. There's a subtle relief in not having to choose slowdown, having it chosen for you. Winter also reduces narrative pressure. There are fewer cultural expectations to make the most of it. Summer is loaded with implied opportunity. Winter simply exists. This absence of narrative allows people to exist without constantly evaluating their experiences. Even loneliness is interpreted differently in winter. Solitude feels seasonal rather than personal. Being alone doesn't automatically mean something is wrong. The environment normalizes quiet. This reframing reduces self-judgment. People who love winter often resist the idea that happiness must be bright, loud, or energetic. Their emotional vocabulary includes calm, quiet satisfaction, and internal coherence. Winter fits this vocabulary naturally. Importantly, this preference doesn't need justification. It doesn't require trauma, introversion, or rejection of joy. It reflects a different relationship with stimulation, time, and meaning. Winter lovers aren't escaping life. They're interacting with it in a mode that feels sustainable. And that's the core psychological insight. Loving winter isn't about weather, it's about alignment. Alignment between environment and nervous system, between pace and attention, between cultural permission and internal needs. Some people bloom in expansion, others stabilize in contraction. Neither is superior. They're complementary ways of moving through the same world. Winter just happens to make that difference visible.